Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of the Rotoworld Football Podcast. Feels like I just spoke with you. We're back again. My name is Josh Norris here, this time on this important Week 4 waiver episode with he himself, John Daigle. Diggsy, how are we feeling after 3 weeks under our belt?
This week was actually lighter for us, I believe.
Yep.
A lot of injuries that weren't too shocking, and the pivots aren't too crazy like last week. This week is an issue, though, only because it's a lot of touch and go. A lot of coaches came out on Monday and just outright said, we'll get something back to you by Wednesday. Like, we are waiting on a lot of news, which is not good. Like, last week we nailed it, right? We talked about Devontae Freeman as if he was already going to sign, and it happened on Monday. So we're going to try and think forward here with these injuries as if these players will either miss or not miss time, given the tea leaves we've read through Monday news.
Yeah, this is always a forward-thinking show. We never think about when people that appear on these shows, pick the Jets against the spread or pick the Saints as winners instead of the Packers, Daigle. We always think forward and what could people be wrong about. You're not even smiling when I'm making fun of you and joking about you. You are deep into these waivers. I'll also add, Daigle, and correct me if I'm wrong, some players will be coming back this week, possibly, that were on short-term IR, the 3-week boomerang IR. So those are maybe not some names that we're thinking about now, but some you might have stashed, like Deebo Samuel. He might practice this week, so on and so forth, which is this interesting layer added onto this crazy 2020.
I'll include a list in the waiver wire column with quick blurbs on all. But yes, Damian Harris sounds like he should be back, which is funny timing since Sony Michel just had his best game of the season, even though it was still Rex Burkhead, who exploded for touchdowns without James White, who should also be back sometime soon. So a odd situation there to walk through. And then Deebo Samuel, it sounds like they're going to let him practice Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and then judge about his status for week 4 from there. Also, another player we'll talk about is Trey Burton, because we think he's going to come back and ruin a player who has been good the past 2 weeks, but we'll discuss that in a second.
Well, we always start this episode with the drop list / injury list. Any names that we haven't touched on already that you do want to discuss?
So the drop list, I got to tell you, everyone's doing a really good job of just getting rid of the players that shouldn't be rostered. Of course, that list only includes players on Yahoo leagues that are rostered in over 50% of fantasy leagues. And it's so far so good. There aren't many players I'm looking to shed. Not a single quarterback, the same old tight ends like Austin Hooper, for example. I think one player, though, that people will ask why they can't drop him is going to be Jarvis Landry. And I am just saying that I want to hold on to him. Maybe you have to start him, right, this week because you're in a pinch with so many injuries. But I want to hold on one more week. The issue is the Browns' 23 pass attempts in the last 2 games, like 23 in week 2 and 23 in week 3. And Jarvis Landry, of course, has suffered with 3 and 4 targets in between since he's still running fewer routes than Odell Beckham. But this is a Cowboys defense that remains atrocious and littered with injuries. And DK and Tyler Lockett certainly helped this stat, but still has allowed the second most fantasy points to opposing wideouts. So if you are holding on to Jarvis, it is wait and see for this week. And then if he does not have a good game, whether you start him or not, we can definitely cut bait in week 5.
Yeah, so far, Kevin Stefanski as the Browns play caller is not quite getting involved, the wide receivers like he did in Minnesota with Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen. But there are plenty of games remaining, 13, in fact. All right, John Daigle, this is what we're really here for. Again, Diggsy posts his column around lunchtime on Tuesdays. Go to the site to check that out. Also, as he mentioned, this is only a list of players that are available in at least 50% of Yahoo leagues out there. I'm sure in each and every week he does, he mentions 1 or 2 that people are curious about, but they're rostered more than you think. But again, all of these names, we'll mention the percentages, are available in most likely your league. So let's start off. It's wide receiver heavy. We'll start off with Justin Jefferson, 69% available on Yahoo leagues. Daigle, I talk about it so far, it feels like every single time I sit down to do a podcast, that just the plan of the Vikings wasn't quite there in terms of replacing Stephon Diggs. Well, what we saw this past week was Justin Jefferson really winning at every level of the field in his first real extended work, it felt like. Short, intermediate, and even downfield, which is an added benefit to him, but also an added benefit to Kirk Cousins and this offense as a whole.
outright moved on from BC Johnson, who was the starter in 2 wide sets through the first 2 weeks, and instead instilled Justin Jefferson finally into the offense for him to have 7 catches, 175 yards, and a touchdown. Jefferson played 51 of 65 snaps. He ran a route on 91% of Kirk Cousins' dropbacks as the clear number 2 receiver behind Thielen, and then accrued a 33% target share. He is finally the starter, and there's finally someone else for Cousins to throw to ahead of this blow-up matchup with the Texans in week 4, rather than having BC Johnson and Irv Smith depended on weekly.
Yeah, the eye test matched and the numbers, as you outlined, matched. I mean, it was a really breakout performance, I thought, with Justin Jefferson. And again, he did it at every level of the field, and he did it with separation, and he did it contested. And as we've discussed, the Vikings are craving a second pass-catching option. And I would be very surprised, let's put it this way, if anyone tops your list other than Justin Jefferson this week, if you're really in need of a wide receiver.
And I would sneakily try and buy low on Adam Thielen since he did fall behind in target share in this game, and we still expect him to lead in targets the rest of the way. The fact that there's someone else to go to is terrific news for Thielen.
Before we get into more pass catchers, let's first dive a little bit into some running backs. Myles Gaskin is still available in 53% of Yahoo leagues. Myles Gaskin, I guess, is still working as a lead ball carrier of the Miami Dolphins, a team that we haven't seen since last Thursday.
Not only working as a lead ball carrier, but getting increased opportunity weekly. Myles Gaskin in the last 3 games has progressively seen his snaps jump from 63 to 65 to 75 last week against the Jaguars. He handled 82% of the running back touches in week 3, and then also had a 25% target share. And the good news is for Gaskin, not only becoming a workhorse back, but you look at the Dolphins' next 3 games, the Seahawks, the 49ers, who are continued to be banged up, and then the Broncos, who have 5 or 6 starters still on IR and expected to have them on IR at that time. So I think the opportunity is finally there for Gaskin as someone I'm comfortable starting as a usage-based RB2.
Moving on, another running back is Carlos Hyde, who's available, I thought it would be larger than this, Daigle, 81% of Yahoo leagues out there. Carlos Hyde, for all of you that do not know this, is the backup running back to the Seattle Seahawks. At least we believe so. We know what happened to Chris Carson at the end of that game against the Cowboys. He had his knee twisted by Tristan Hill. It was pretty much one of the last snaps. We're not exactly sure what his diagnosis is. What's the news so far on that, Daigle? And what's your belief that Carlos Hyde is the backup running back here and not someone like DJ Dallas?
Pete Carroll, ever so optimistic, sounded as if he is not ruling out Chris Carson for week 4 just yet. But given the word that came out right after that injury and later on Sunday evening, I would assume Chris Carson misses this next game. I don't think all of the opportunity will fall to Carlos Hyde, actually, because Chris Carson was playing an integral role in the passing game as well. But I think Carlos Hyde will at least be the goal line back, and then DJ Dallas and Travis Homer will sprinkle in intermittently. However, we can definitely project Hyde to lead this team in carries and touches if Chris Carson misses the game. So that's the player I'm targeting off waiver wires.
And if anyone has a resume of that group, it is Carlos Hyde. Now, it can be a bit mixed, but again, I think it's worth noting that Carlos Hyde is coming off a 1,000-yard rushing season. And so he at least has that out there for Pete Carroll to latch onto if he wants to. Okay, back to pass catchers. Golden Tate, Giants wide receiver, is available in 61% of Yahoo leagues. Not to skip a few steps here, Daigle, but would you think it's a bad strategy to just bypass anyone that is available in this Giants offense? Because I am terrified of it and really want no exposure to anyone there.
Absolutely not, because no matter how bad they are, and they were bad on Sunday, Golden Tate continues supporting himself without Sterling Shepard. We now have 6 games of evidence going back to last year with Daniel Jones and without Shepard. And in those 6 games, Golden Tate has averaged 8.5 targets per game and a 23% target share. And remember, we didn't want to draft Daniel Jones at the beginning of the season in redraft leagues because the schedule was hard. But now the schedule's opens up with opportunity. The Rams, the Cowboys, Washington, and the Eagles the next 4 weeks. So if anything, these are up-tempo matchups. I understand it is grueling how bad they played yesterday, the Giants. But we can assume Tate at least is a high floor in all 4 of those games. And it's someone I'm definitely comfortable as a wide receiver 3 over the next month of the season.
Wow. I mean, that's so much more optimistic than I would have thought, but that's where the guru, Daigle, and I'm just sitting here trying to host this thing. Okay.
We also got a lot of spots to fill, Josh. There are a lot of injuries going on.
I'm going to skip the tight end for now and come back to it. Let's jump to Brandon Nyuk, who's available in 72% of Yahoo leagues. I still have Brandon Nyuk on a ton of rosters, Daigle, because I drafted him when he was injured this preseason, and I thought it was a tremendous value. Obviously, he didn't do much in week 1, was barely involved in week 2, but then we saw in week 3, those manufactured touches, those catches, what Kyle Shanahan is known for, even in a complete blowout against those Giants. Brandon Nyuk was very involved. And I think this might be the trajectory of just a rookie, Daigle, who is just continuing to learn the game, get more comfortable, and the team is getting more comfortable with him as well. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if, I mean, I'm not going to say he's going to have 17 fantasy points or whatever he had this past weekend, but if he continues to get more and more usage because he's more comfortable in this offense, and again, his play caller and Kyle Shanahan is one of the best in the NFL right now.
Those manufactured touches you mentioned were super important because remember, he only runs a 4.5 40, or he actually ran that at the combine coming out, but he still averaged 11.1 yards after the catch, an elite number with the Sun Devils. So if they use him like that and leverage his strength, then he can be a terrific player. And that's what they did on 8 targets and 3 running back carries. And he has still played over 70. He's played at least 72% of the snaps the past 2 weeks after that hamstring injury from the preseason. So he's clearly healthy. And I think he'll still be involved when Steve Samuel returns because they need help in that offense. And clearly no one else has done enough to remove Brandon Nyuk from the field once Samuel comes back as well. So I think it's someone we can depend on in a very good offense moving forward.
Yeah, I don't think it's an either or with Deebo Samuel or Brandon Nyuk. Mm-hmm. Like, I think Kyle is just going to put both of them on the field at the same time, especially seeing all the other injuries they've had when Raheem Mostert and George Kittle keep going down the list. There's a reason why, they spent a 2nd-round pick on Deebo, then the next year spent a 1st-round pick on Brandon Nyuk, and it's because they can be used together. Again, it's not either or. Okay, let's close out this big list with Ally Cox, who has really been a featured part of this Colts offense for the first three weeks of the season.
100 yards in week 2 in place of Jack Doyle, and Jack Doyle came back, and Ally Cox outsnapped Doyle 36-32 and saw 3 targets to Doyle 0. Yes, Doyle ran more routes, but Ally Cox, once again, as he's done when he's been handed opportunity, proved to be the more explosive player of the two, even having a big 45-yard catch whenever the game was still competitive before the Colts benched all of their starters in the final quarter. The issue for this suggestion, as I'll talk about in the column, is that Trey Burton is one of those players, as we discussed at the beginning of the pod, that seems to be able to return in week 4. And it sounds like they are going to get him back. And if they do get him back, I don't know how this shakes out. It still probably means Doyle is the high floor player, and we want to still bid slightly on Ally Cox, but it's a situation where I don't know against the Bears if I'd be comfortable starting Ally Cox this week. I'd rather pick him up for cheap wherever possible and then hold and see what happens.
I mean, tight end is kind of gross around the league already, and we're only now into week 4 after just 3 games played for every single team. I mean, we know that Frank Reich spoke highly of Trey Burton prior to the season. They spent some time together in Philadelphia, but Ally Cox, while it's been a lot of positive, there's been a couple of negatives as well. Wouldn't be surprising at all if he finds a role, but again, you want him to have the same role that he is having right now, and that is the question.
The tight end position is just simply down to the guys running routes who aren't getting accurate passes, or the guys running 3 routes and you hope to have a touchdown. Like, that's what you have to jostle weekly now.
Speaking of, like, week 1 waiver wonder, Logan Thomas is like being used as one of the best tight ends in the NFL in terms of his routes and how many times, not being targeted per se, but just his usage so far. And it's just not happening because of quarterback play. So, like, the process is right with with a lot of these players. It's just not coming into fruition so far. Okay, I'm not going to waste any more time, Daigle. Let's dive into the deep cuts. I'll hand the mic over to you.
We discussed Michael Pittman last week as someone who is not going to take Paris Campbell's role in the slot because Pittman ran 13% of his routes from the slot at USC across 3 seasons and wasn't used like that with the Colts to start the year. And it was the same case in week 3. He only played 3 snaps from the slot, and now he's injured. So that means they have no choice but to go to Zach Pascal, who has now led the team in slot snaps in the past 2 games without Campbell. It's a dicey situation for the Colts offense because they have been too good the past 2 weeks in blowouts and benched their starters in the fourth quarter. But hopefully the Bears can be competitive. Hopefully they just run into more competitive game scripts, and then we get a full-time role for not only T.Y. Hilton, but Pascal as well. So I think he's a more than serviceable deep league flex option moving forward. Another guy who's played really well, Gabriel Davis. And as we know, John Brown left with an injury in the second half, and Gabriel Davis came in, played 74% of the snaps, and has just played outright great the past 2 weeks. He had a diving catch to help out Josh Allen in the end zone in week 2. This week, 4 catches for 81 yards, showing explosiveness, has done routine pro things despite being a rookie on the outside looking in with minimal reps in the preseason. So I love the fact that Gabriel Davis is not only getting an opportunity, but it's probably going to be a full-time role if John Brown stays out. And then another and/or situation we're going to have to sift through, and I will in the column for us, will be the John Hightower, Greg Ward situation for the Eagles, since Jalen Reagor's likely out until week 10, and Deshaun Jackson. It sounded more precautionary, but the fact is he still had a hamstring injury, and they didn't want to throw him back in. So whatever the case, Hightower was the one who actually led the receivers in snaps, and he came out and ran routes on 90% of Carson Wentz's dropbacks. The issue is that, like Jackson and like Reagor before, he also suffered from Wentz's outright inaccuracy through the first 3 games. And his targets as a 4.4 speedster with a 98th percentile 10-yard split are going to be the targets that are impossible to catch, like Jackson and Reagor, that probably frustrate us weekly. Whereas Greg Ward, we know what he's going to do. He's going to be serviceable from the slot, have a high floor, and you will be angry with the ceiling. So do you have any leans between those two, Josh?
No, I was actually going to rewind a little bit, Daigle.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
And say, am I crazy? Am I crazy for wanting to pick up Zach Pascal over Golden Tate? Because I want pieces of a better offense, and I think their opportunity and their volume might be very similar.
I would take Tate. I don't think you're crazy. I would take Tate, though.
Okay. Just food for thought for everyone out there, and you can check out the rest of the deep cuts list over in Daigle's column. Again, it should be up on Tuesday around lunchtime. Go and check it out. All right. That is going to do it for us. If you enjoyed this, if we've been helping you on this waiver episode, leave us a 5-star rating and review. It tremendously helps us out. We're coming out of our best month of the podcast ever, and that is a massive thank you to all of you. We'll be back on Thursday morning and Friday morning, and Sundays, noon Eastern, Rotoworld Live, served by Applebee's. Go and check us out there. So for John Daigle, I am Josh Norris, up the villa. Talk to y'all soon. See ya.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.